Hello everyone, and welcome to today's lesson where we'll be looking at how to make an evidence-based argument. And so to start off, let's try to understand what is an argument. So an argument is a work of persuasion. So you're trying to use it to convince others to agree with your claim or viewpoint, which they may doubt or disagree with. So when you're writing an essay or maybe just speaking your mind, you are presenting your argument. This is your side, your viewpoint, and you're trying to make others agree with this viewpoint as well. There are a couple of different ways in which people try to back up their arguments. There's opinion-based arguments and there is evidence-based arguments. And so today we are going to be looking at how to make evidence-based arguments because these arguments are often more successful. And that's because an opinion-based argument is based on personal beliefs and thoughts. And it's not that these opinions are ever wrong by any means, but in academic work, you need more than just an opinion to prove your point. That's why we use an evidence-based argument. And so when it's evidence-driven rather than opinion-driven, you're not using your own work or words. You're answering why and giving the reason as to why an answer is what it is. What is evidence? Evidence is gathered from an original source or other text that supports an argument or a thesis. Such evidence can be found in the form of a quotation, paraphrase materials, or description of a text. So in order to present an argument with solid backup, you want to make sure that you are using evidence from the text. So those are quotations, those paraphrase materials, and descriptions. That way, if someone asks why, you can point them exactly where in the text you got your answer. You're not just making it up in your head. So now that we know what an evidence-based argument is, we're going to go over how we can try to make them within our own work. And so for this, I'm going to go over a couple of different tips and practices to do while reading to formulate evidence-based arguments. While reading, you're going to want to maybe mark off, underline, highlight whatever words, lines, ideas, or phrases seem important or interesting. Whatever question you need to be answering. As you're reading the excerpt or document, you want to make sure that you're thinking of that question in your head and going through and marking off different sections that relate to that question. For example, if I had an open response question based off of an excerpt which was asking about how the author uses metaphors within the text to get their point across. Every time I came across a metaphor within the text, I would mark that off. So that way, when I'm going back through trying to figure out what I'm trying to answer, I can easily go back and see what I'm looking for. And that way, I've already marked off those key phrases that can be my pieces of evidence when writing my evidence-driven argument. So then after you've read the whole excerpt and you've marked off initial words, lines, or ideas that may seem important, you want to see what patterns do you see. Are there any important ideas or interesting details that you see that connect all of these different ideas? That's going to give you a hint as to what that answer might be. Going back to this question of metaphor use within a basic excerpt, maybe metaphors are only used to describe nature within this excerpt. That's not something that you would know if you hadn't marked off all of those metaphors before, and now looking back through them, you realize they're all about nature. So seeing those connections, you can now generate a thought and write your evidence-driven argument. The third question that you want to be asking is, what conclusion is there that you can draw from the text that you could then support with evidence from the text? So in this example, although the excerpt is not in front of you, you could say that the author is using metaphors as a way to personify nature and make it more accessible to the reader. And now, because you have marked off all of those different examples of metaphors within the text, you can then quote a couple of different instances where metaphors are being used to personify nature and back up your argument within your essay. So now to review those tips and practices to do while reading. First, while you're reading, mark off lines, topics, ideas, phrases that may seem important and relevant to the question that you're trying to answer. Next, you're going to be looking for patterns and connections between all of the things you marked off in part 1. And then thirdly, you're going to try to make a conclusion based off of the connections that you can see and which can be supported by evidence in the text. And now that you have, if you were to just say that the author uses metaphor as a way to personify nature, but were unable to back up your claim with the evidence provided using these easy steps, then your argument wouldn't be as valid for the person reading and, more importantly, grading your essay. My challenge for all of you is to take a reading from your ELA class that you recently have gone over, or maybe just a couple of pages from a book that you've recently read, and using evidence-based arguments, see if you can answer the general question, what is the author's purpose in writing the story? Thank you all for watching. Today we went over the effectiveness of evidence-driven arguments instead of using opinion-based arguments, and now we have tips and skills in order to identify evidence within a text. And now you can formulate an argument based on evidence, not opinion.